you're in attendance. Today is a Digital World Town Hall. It is just after 5:30 Mountain Time on a Tuesday. We're grateful for those that are here and joining us, especially for those that are helping to moderate. Particularly, we've got Wally and Terrence and Elle on today. So thank you for their attendance and helping. You can direct questions that you may have towards them textually, or you'll be able to audibly go ahead and ask them at a couple different ecosystems. So either townhall.clear.events or Ripple Effect, or there's a new element that'll be coming live within some of the Hawaiian elements, which we'll talk a little bit about. But today will consist of general updates and advancements and a report out, and then any kind of questions that you may have as it relates to that. As a reminder, this is a private membership association. Some of the things we'll talk about are followed inside of that and maybe forward looking. There are concepts that we'll go over that may be foreign to some. It's okay. Just ask questions and we'll all learn together. So thank you for taking the time. One of the biggest things that I'd like to report, at least review, is the Hawaiian nation has literally stood back up again. And some people remember it or refer to it as a kingdom. So whether it's a kingdom, whether it's a nation, whether it's a country, it's all basically the same things. There's a lot of treaties that have been signed historically, and we're grateful for the digital world to be able to play a role in this important opportunity for this culture to not be forgotten and to be able to stand up for future generations and not continue to just be walked over is not the right word, because there's really a lot of love and giving and oneness that I find in this culture, but they're wonderful people. But they're also, in many ways, especially in the years spending time within different Polynesian cultures, particularly down in Aotearoa, these people are warriors. They have soft hearts, but by stature, they're strong people, and not just the men, but the women as well. So grateful to be able to spend time with them and help them to stand up this important ecosystem. The ecosystem initially will be known at the destination of Hawaiian.life. You'll see it continue to grow and morph over time as this culture basically regains its history with what was known as the Hawaiian Islands. Some, like the British, would like to call it the Sandwich Islands, and some others that occupy it would like to call it just generally Hawaii. Today, I'm actually coming to you from the island of Hawaii, coined later because of confusion as the Big Island, but ultimately, and many other reasons, but ultimately this is a very special place because not just the spirit that's felt here, and for me, there's different spirits that are felt in the different islands as general, but the people here, they stand up. They stand up a lot more here than I've seen in other places. And it's been interesting to just rub shoulders with them and to understand kind of the journey that they've been on over and over, through systems, through processes, doing their best to try and understand what's reality and what's not, and then dealing with all of the different things of normal life in the mix. And it's been an eye-opener there. So not only is this website live, but the actual governance process within it is actually starting to take shape. You'll see some advancements within the Declaration, within the Constitution, and as well as petitions that will actually start creating processes and policies within these different councils that will start forming. And it's not a matter of starting, because this is actually the same way that this kingdom was run prior. And one thing that I find very interesting is this kingdom, even though they may have had a king in the days, though that king gave his right, his power, his mana to God, their creator. And it's been very eye-opening to understand that councils are a normal thing, and giving thanks and respect for why we're here and kind of how we've gotten here is very, very eye-opening as well. You'll see certain things around policies and procedures that tie from these councils as it relates to some of the new different services. These are parallel services to what they're receiving from other ecosystems, namely the United States of America, as it occupies these Hawaiian Islands. they deliver similar type services, but they're not cryptographically proven. So it's not leveraging technology. It's not leveraging infrastructure, but it's leveraging a normal process that humans have had an ability to do historically, namely colonial-based services and systems. Maybe they talk about a judicial system. Maybe there's a fragmented land management system, which I'd say is not even aligned in any ways. But we'll talk a lot about what it's not the current systems, but what the future systems will actually be. When I say current systems, I'm talking the systems that are occupying their framework currently. So I'll be very specific. The actual Hawaiian Life app is now live. It doesn't necessarily, you can actually snag it. If we come back here to this main page, you can actually grab it and download it right here. Now, if you have a Clear phone, an Armor phone, a Freedom phone, or even some of the pre-install Samsung Life on Samsung phones, this will not work. So you'll literally need a generic Android-based system that doesn't have any kind of Life-based app on it. So what that means is it's not a decentralized phone. So if you can take any Android phone that's not decentralized already, you can download this Hawaiian Life, and then you'll have the ability to pull down a wallet as well. And that's a huge advancement this last week as well. But this Hawaiian Life will basically give you, actually, what we'll do is we're going to navigate over. I don't think that may just link over to ClearOS. Oh, no, it actually downloads it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to clearos.app. This is the marketplace for ClearOS mobile. Now there's a ClearOS server and it has a marketplace, and there's a ClearOS mobile and it has a marketplace. And don't be fooled, that's actually how this ecosystem right here works. So you've got a server operating system for the back end and a mobile operating system for the front end, and they literally link together. And when we look at them, we come over here and you can kind of see this is an advancement this last week where you see this new Hawaiian Life that is actually deployed as a decentralized app. So these are all decentralized apps. There's lots of other apps that are out there, as everyone in the world knows, that uses an Android or an Apple phone. But this particular app, I'll go through some of the interface here. This particular app will allow an individual to create their own identity based upon 12 words, and they link it to their fingerprint. And they can also back it up, but they can also have this little scan button right here. They can also add family members. We'll get into that in the future. But they can add this little scan button, which now allows them to log into decentralized systems. You'll also note that Hawaiian Life also has Hawaiian Pay, which you can actually download here, or you'll be able to download it on the other side. And what that enables you to do is actually to have a wallet. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. And I wonder, Wally, would you message Ty and ask if ClearOS mobile marketplace has Hawaiian Pay built into it yet? And then just let us know before the end of this meeting if that's okay. So yeah, so this is big news. You know, that's actually gone live. In addition to the website and the apps and the formation of different systems, they'll do things like turning up services for birth certificates, for marriage certificates. And these are cryptographic systems that don't divulge the individual's identity unless there's an interaction and an approval that happens. And the interaction goes something like this. Let's say that someone wants to validate this. They can scan this and it pulls up some information about the individual, but they can also request to have more information disclosed. And then real time, the other individual on the other side of it basically gets approval to do it. So if I'm a parent and I have a child and I want to validate that that's my child, I can literally do it. And that also ties in when we started talking a little bit about these family members. So not only does everything start with kind of a genealogical tie and how we're all related, but it also ties in cryptographically. So not only assets short-term, but long-term can all be built into that. And then let's say that there's a relationship built and, you know, a marriage, and there can be different defined relationships. And so you enter into those, And then that also ties to a dispute. If there's a dispute that happens later on, it can also resolve that as well. Right now, what a lot of folks don't understand is we may be born into a certain environment. And let's say we're born into a certain country so that we're automatically a citizen of that country. But can you change citizenship? Can you add multiple citizenship? Are you forced to stay in that? And what we always talk about is you're basically given three things: your genes, your environment, and your choices. And your choices can actually change your environment and your genes. Some people would argue that you can't change nationality, or some people would argue that you can't change your DNA. Well, that's not real. Your thoughts, everything, you can literally change and choose to have a different environment. Does that mean that certain things automatically can shift up? No, and I won't even get into the details of that. But you can choose a jurisdiction. So I'll give you an example. People can choose where they actually want their birth certificate from. Just because you're born in a certain area doesn't mean. So one of the things that I really love, and I won't be specific with names, but this is not the first concept that the Hawaiian ecosystem has actually questioned this. As a matter of fact, Hawaiians can be born in the Hawaiian Islands and automatically say, hey, I'm in the hospital, I'm taking this child home, and I want to basically fill out an application. On the application, the mother fills out as an informant the name of this child. And that starts a process. It starts a process of identity. And those identities, as we know it, have literally been taken from us. They've been taken from us in a process of you just comply. You just say, hey, you know what? This is what this name is, and this is the date that they're born. This is the mother that informant on it, and this is maybe a father that's also listed. Next thing you know, they get a number, whether it's, in the United States and New Zealand and Australia, it doesn't matter. You get a number that identifies how that individual links. And that carries on through a process of your life, whether you're tracking ability to get credit, ability to have an identity that can actually, whether it's buy something or travel somewhere, it literally builds on top of you. But the key is, how are the systems behind it using that information? Is it for freedom? Or is it for control? Does it oppress, or does it limit or enable choices from an individual? So same thing with marriage. You can choose to be in an environment. We currently have about 32, almost 33,000 marriages that have been conducted online, cryptographically signed. Some people ask me, what's this cryptographic stuff? Is that like crypto? Can I buy a coin with that? And it's very different than that. As a matter of fact, this is what a cryptography signature is. So this digital world ID, this basically is for this particular marriage based upon an individual. Here we've got Peter and we've got Wendy, and they chose to come together on a certain date to be able to, and you've got a cryptographic key for the individual A and individual B that in a certain jurisdiction did certain things. And when you look into this, it can actually see the details of how that actually came about. But the point that I'm trying to make is the jurisdiction in which people choose can now think about this a different way. Sometimes you go shopping and you might buy a box of Kleenex, which is a brand and whatever else. You might buy a box of Kleenex at Walmart or Safeway or Vons or whatever other location that competes for your business. But that box of Kleenex is the same box of Kleenex through those different stores, but the store that you buy them from compete for your business. They compete to say, hey, this store is clean. This store smells good. This store carries the items that you want. This store does it at the price that you want. So governments, nations, kingdoms can actually compete for their citizens or there's another element of citizen as a form of slavery as well. And when you look at it, there can be nationals. So like a country could have nationals instead of citizens. And the individual can say, you know what, I will choose to be a part of that. And maybe as a mother or as a father, I actually want to choose to have my child in this jurisdiction. I want to choose to be able to, and so the point is The Hawaiian Islands were actually recognized, seriously recognized by many other countries. And so them standing up and taking this back, but doing it in such a way that's building on future systems where identity can actually be realized. Services or registrations or certificates or licenses can all be issued within this ecosystem. So imagine you get a driver's license based upon, you're proving your identity. And so what happens like in the Lahaina fires when someone doesn't have a birth certificate because it just got burnt up? You go through and have family or whakapapa, genealogy. Your relatives can actually validate that this individual has a certain name. Why? Because that's how life works. A mother actually validates that this is the name of an individual. Now, what if that mother's not here? What if she died in the fire? Their family can validate that. And so imagine we have one of the largest, if not the largest fires that have just occurred, almost 3,000 buildings burned, 4,000 plus people displaced. They're not even being transparent on how many people have passed away, whether they're adults, whether they're children. And there's lots of dialogue around that. There's lots of dialogue on why it started. There's lots of dialogue on why there wasn't sirens. There's lots of dialogue on why there wasn't water in the fire hydrants when it came through. There's lots of dialogue on the land and policies and other things. That's not what this is about. What this is about is identifying an individual where their identity is actually being stolen. It's not about the land being stolen. It's not about what was burned down. It's about them standing up and saying, you know what, just because my identity, my driver's license, my birth certificate, my marriage certificate burnt up in this fire, that doesn't mean that I have to comply with a system to get a new one that's not exactly what I was. And that's when I'm saying their identity is being stolen. You'll hear more and more from some very key individuals that I've grown to love and respect and learn from, that literally had exactly what we're talking about. Their birth certificate was burnt up, went and go get a new one. They said, well, you can't have this model of it, but we'll give you this model of it and then a certified copy of it. And oh, by the way, the data on it is actually different. So are your parents' names spelled correctly? Is your nationality and your bloodlines defined correctly? Now you got to remember, we're going through, we talk about this thing called a digital divide, where we're going from everything has been physical and now it's digital. So think about it. That individual, who I want to say is in his 50s or 60s, when he was born, there wasn't a digital database that his information was put into. And there wasn't a DNA process that you could actually synchronize MIBs within DNA swabs. That's what's happening when people are actually taking PGX tests or PCR tests. Any of these, and a PCR test basically uses a PGX process. So PGX is where they actually swab the cheek, and a PCR is where they swab up the nose. But ultimately, the MIPS that are coming off of that is DNA. And they're linking those DNA. So if you did a DNA sequence from like Ancestry or 23andMe, you would spit in a cup. It does the same thing. And you can link that to you as an individual, and then you can genealogically link all of the different sequences, and the region you came from, you know what nationality you were. And we have to understand that these nationalities actually blend. When you get a Polynesian, a pure Hawaiian that marries or connects with someone else that's not of that same bloodline, let's say Sweden. So you've got a Hawaiian and a Sweden that connect. What happens to the actual child? So a good example here that actually comes from that. That's a really good example of it. It basically is changing and shifting over time. And so this advancement, literally building from the ash, and by the way, Lahaina is automatically starting to grow back. It's not because humans have miraculously spent a bunch of money and figured out how to stop certain things from continuing to ruin the environment, the water, I won't even get into some of the negative stuff, but you start seeing rebirth of trees. where green foliage is coming back. A tree that is black and burnt up next to a car that's burnt up, next to, in some cases you got cars that are all burnt up, but nothing next to it's burnt. It's crazy. But it's starting to see growth. It's starting to see things come back, and it comes back in such a natural way. And that's really what this process is going to do. It's going to start from the ground up with a whole community of people that literally focus on genealogical studies. Who are they? How are they related? What are their names? And not a lot of people understand this, but genealogy is a very sacred thing. Who you come from, who your ancestors are, especially in different cultures. So people may think, well, wow, that's a really long name, or that's a really weird name, or that's a really, it's not just within the Hawaiian culture. If you go to South America, you see the same type of things. If you go to the Middle East, in United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, you can literally know from their name what tribe they're from. If they're Bedouins, what their religion is, who they're warring with, you name it. You can literally start understanding that from a name. Now, when you tie that to a cryptography-based system, you can do so much more. I mean, we're talking endless. Not only can you not disclose so for instance, you've got, let's jump down, let's look at this one. So let's look at a driver's license, okay? So let's think through, when you get pulled over, what happens if you can even say, well, I didn't even do anything wrong, but you get pulled over, do you know why you got pulled over? Yes, no, if they give you that respect. And I'd like to see your driver's license, your insurance, and your registration. There's a reason why they're trained to ask for those things. There's also compliance that's happening along the process there. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong to comply or not comply, or to be respectful or not disrespectful, or ask a question or not answer a question. That's up to you as an individual to do. But imagine the ability to have an interaction where a license plate that's tied to a registration, that's tied to a vehicle, that then people can own, companies can finance, and people can drive, which are all different relationships to this one vehicle, can then become its own living, breathing entity. So an officer could scan the license plate and automatically know, these are the people that drive it, these are the people that own it, these are the people that financed it. And then they can have a conversation with an individual to say, hey, let's see if you can actually drive this. And imagine if that officer can actually validate that individual can drive it without even knowing their full name. That's what we're talking about. So, we're not talking about online, which is a whole nother mess. It gets solved with this, but we're talking about a pretty complicated use case where an officer can stay safe based upon the information they're gathering. They can be respectful through a process, and an individual that was pulled over can actually say, hey, I want to comply. I want to see if I've done something wrong. I want to see if I've done something wrong, hold me to account. But if I haven't done something wrong, then please don't harass me. Please make sure that the things that you're asking me are fair and don't violate rights as an individual. In other words, don't over control things that are inappropriate. So vehicle registration, whether it's an automobile, maybe it's a boat, maybe it's a gun, maybe it's a motorcycle, you can register assets within this new ecosystem. Imagine the ability to actually have a company, an organization, association, you name it. You can register these different ecosystems and then have assets that tie to it. And then payment systems. And these are some of the things that we're currently working on. And then land management. So how do you actually tie an individual or a business to land management that is not just in a particular region or county or city or province or state or country, but you can actually tie it in a global, one big globe that has every piece of land built into it. And you can literally dig into it. I'll give you an example. So this is actually Lahaina here. And let's say that I want to modify how this particular building, and that's not a good building. I'm going to grab a different one. I'm going to jump into, let's say this home was actually rebuilt in a different way, okay? let's say that when it was rebuilt, it was actually rebuilt like this. And then let's say I submit this and this neighbor says, no, it wasn't like that. They go back in, they create a dispute. The dispute process around land management is all integrated and all tied, just like the dispute management process is tied into like a marriage. So you define it, you go and you pick the jurisdiction, you move forward with it. It's a very clean, you're removing friction, whether it's how do you actually lodge a complaint, how do you set a time to go through your process, and then how do you actually rectify it. And if there's a problem with how it's rectified, then they also have a process that they can basically hold other ecosystems to account. So land management and this dispute management is really some very key processes. So those are huge services. One of the biggest things that I personally see happen this last week is the Hawaiian people on their own are literally aligning. They're standing up for what is right, whereas historically, a lot of people would just say there's an injustice here and something's wrong, it doesn't feel right, and they would act on their own accord. Maybe it's with this pocket on that island, maybe it's with this group or that community, or maybe it's just at a protest, or maybe it's in spots. But the ability for them to actually unite, lock arms, and stand up or even standing up and then locking arms, depending on which ecosystem it is, because I'm seeing both of them happen. This is a reality, and it's starting to become very, very real, and it's got nothing to do with a system. The system is there as tools and technologies to help organize, and there'll be a training process and a defining process, but ultimately, that's basically the advancements that's happening over this last week. As a reminder, if anybody wants, they can literally design a logo and drop it in here, and then there'll be a voting process that comes later on. So we'll stop with the details there, because a lot of this is not even, I'll work on some of the elements in training, but me personally, and the digital world is really a service provider into these different nations. So we look forward to defining that and going through some of the details there as well. The other things that are also very important is when you actually log into the system, and this is into the system. These are some of the things we did earlier today. So there's some folks, we met with some very key folks that have spent a lifetime inside of building out. Here, I'll actually show you some of the stuff that they were doing. So we've got an individual on. Tom, you're welcome to say boo if you'd like to, but he was particular in this particular call that we had earlier. But you can see here, there's a couple teams that are defined as assets that are a part of an association. For those of you who didn't know, the NFL is actually an association, not some would say, it's a company or it's a trust, but it's really like a private membership association is what is actually defined as. So we created it digitally here. You can see the cryptographic key, but this is anybody can basically come in and do these things, but then how do you build a reputation around it, whether it's around the actual organization, in this case, an association, or around an asset? How do you actually continue to build and mature that will come in time. The other side of what we're not showing you here, so this is the back end for the digital or for the Hawaiian nation, where they've got councils, disputes, polls. So you can kind of see an active poll here. One of the things we came up with, should the NFL push back its start 3 weeks? And so people can actually vote. Once this date comes, it locks it in, yada, yada. Marriages is something that will be done here as well. And there may be some folks on the call that will be officiating in that. Driver's licenses, vehicle registration, birth certificates. You'll also see this side nav actually updating over this next week for those of you that are actually actively using it. In my particular profile, I've actually been authorized as a service provider, so I have this additional button here, which basically opens up a service provider panel so that I can see certain things that are happening within this ecosystem that I have the right to basically provide services to. And so I won't dig into all the details, but you can kind of see how, service providers plug in to deliver services based upon what councils create as policy. And it really creates a governance system instead of a government. So instead of a government that is really controlling others, this is a governance system that actually enables society to operate in a very, very free way with service providers that are delivering services to the actual respective nation. So I hope this makes massive sense to you. If it doesn't, let's talk about it. Let's shoot holes in it. Let's literally say that just doesn't make any sense, or I can't see how something like this could actually happen. The viability of it just doesn't feel right. Whatever your concern is, please be bold and honest. Yesterday, we went through, I believe, some of the most wise and firm Hawaiians that I've ever met here on the big island of Hawaii, really called Hawaii. And good questions, solid understanding of judicial systems historically and what colonialism is with Americans versus what, historical culture is with Hawaiians, and how they actually bump into one another, but how can we actually live united on this beautiful land, but still be able to be free nationalists or citizens based upon what we as individuals choose. And I really think that conflict or respectful criticism can also get us to a point where unity can actually happen. So a lot of people may literally just say, Mike, the last 30 minutes of you blabbing means nothing. I don't believe it. I don't, this whole digital ecosystem, the cryptography, the key management, it doesn't make any sense. And I would argue, we see the QR code everywhere now, right? A buddy of mine, actually, wonderful guy, his name is Garrett. You may have followed him on the Bucket List family. If you follow them around at all, wonderful, just amazing family. But he actually helped to do some unique things within that QR code and then sold it off to Snapchat. And now he's doing other things. But the point is imagine if we can actually take the continuance. Now we see barcodes everywhere, right? It's not just with Snapchat, but it's all over the place. I was at a national park today, which in my opinion shouldn't be a national park, but they had QR codes. You'd scan the QR codes. People don't understand when you scan that, if some of these things, just like ads, you can literally be profiled. So they can track where you are. They can track what browser you're using. They can track what phone you have. They can track, because of your phone's links to your names, linked to your IMEI numbers, links to an email account. They literally just linked you into their system. So if you're using QR codes that are actually profiling, that's a negative way to use technology. However, imagine a QR code that actually enables someone to interact with someone else based upon them allowing them to have certain data. And then they can pull that back if they don't want them to. That's really the future. And that's really when we talk about key management and identity and authentication. And the world will talk about it like there's Web3. It's so much bigger than Web3. So it really ties to this reset that humanity has been waiting for. So I'll end there. There's some other fun things that we've gone through, but I'd like to just allow anyone that may have questions or comments or feedback. Now is your time to ask them. So go ahead.
This is Tom. What prevents from putting up your image and putting my name and validating that I'm you?
Well, that's a great question. So let's say that someone were to go in and actually use an ID. And what I'll do is I'll pull up an ID down here. Let's say this driver's license, right? So let's say that someone made a copy of this driver's license and puts a different face in there. Because I think that's the basis of your question, right? And then if someone comes and scans this, then it pulls up a separate site that has an image. So one, you can validate from a URL. Then you can validate based upon the image, the photo that's there. You can validate based upon the actual QR code key. So this key here ties into this QR code. So the QR codes themselves are actually a part of the validation process. So and that's why it's so important to link all these together. So it basically ties everything together, and then it allows the user to actually say, so let's say that you scan on a QR code, and if without me showing the next phase of it here, can I do it? No, I can't do a demo of it right now, but imagine someone scans this, it pulls up another page. That page has the same information. So one, it validates it there. But then the user, so let's give a detailed example. Let's say that an officer comes up and says, show me your ID. So an individual gives them this ID and says, what's this last name? Like, I don't even know who you are. I've got to look at this, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, you don't need to know who I am, but I've given you an ID. I've given you a driver's license. You're welcome to scan it, and it'll pull up all my information. So then the information pulls up on the other side of this. And then let's say the officer says, I actually want to see your last name. So on that other site, they can push a button and it sends a request to the individual, and the individual phone buzzes, and then they basically open it up, and they can accept it by just putting their fingerprint on. So it verifies that who they are. And it's like something you have, something you do, something you are in a certain space and time. That's where we come up with this 5-factor authentication. It's not just, Web3. It's literally you're verifying who they are in real time with them in front of you. So you're seeing them, you're seeing their ID, you're seeing an online approval of you being able to see them. And then the user can say, you know what, just validate that it's me, but don't show my last name, or validate that it's me and show my last name. So there's tons of different ways you can do it. But the fraudulent side of things basically gets removed when you take it off of just one card. So a card can be created, but you can't validate it digitally and cryptographically with all of these other sequences. So the system itself enables a user to cryptographically prove who they are in real time. That humanity has never had or seen. And that's why a lot of these indigenous cultures will actually come to this and say they'll welcome this in. Why? Because they don't want to be in these central systems. These are private. When you look at the Navajos and the Chickasaws and the Hopis and the Cherokees, they understand. They literally understand what these issues are and these atrocities are, even though the Western culture will say, for convenience, I'm going to go ahead and comply with this real ID process so that I can then get a bank account, or I can then travel, or I can just do all these different things. So hopefully that answered your question.
I guess the truth is, why do they even need my name? All they need is my image, my cryptographic number.
You're exactly right. And that's been a topic that's come up. And we do have some processes, for instance, like when we look at this page here, let's actually jump into my profile here. So I can jump into this profile and see, I've even got an email address, because we're testing out an email system that actually ties to some of these systems here. But I've got a last name, I've got a first name, and I've got a photo. Now within this system, I actually have to validate that I want my photo to be shown, or my name to be shown, or not. I think I can go into, so here's an example of something that's not. So you can see here that this manager doesn't have a name or a photo. It's just a cryptographic key, because that information wasn't approved and linked in here. So if the individual says, hey, I want to approve my photo, and I want to approve my first name, and I want to approve my key, they can literally link that in here as well. And even if they want to provide their last name here, they can do that as well. But they control that. And the linkage between the name and the cryptographic key is where a lot of the beauty in this intelligently organized system starts to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get it totally. I was just thinking that, at the end of the day, like with our company, our customers' data files are completely de-identified. And so their name and their email and their address is held in a client data file, and their sensitive data is held in a file that's tied to basically a cryptographic number. You know, and I would think the driver's license is very similar to that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It comes down to kind of the adoption in the real world and versus the digital world. What you're talking about is really how do you scale a digital scalable process? But with some of these governing services, they have to be able to interact real time. So maybe it's checking out a book at a library versus, you know, driving a car, which, you know, so the world can question whether or not you need that at all. But good question, really good question. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
Hey, Michael, it's Beck.
Hi.
Hey, I love all this. I do have a question about the Hawaiian Pay. Is that? So that's the country's own digital wallet. Is that like, what's the difference between that and ClearPay?
Okay, really good question. You always have such good questions. Okay, so I'm going to pull up. This was actually the first transaction. This was the first time it was installed ever. So not even through the testing phase. This was actually rolled out. This was 2 days ago. And you can kind of see, let's see if I can find. This was actually the Hawaiian Life download and then the Hawaiian Pay download. So this was or Hawaiian Wallet download. So this is basically it starting. And what you're seeing here is actually a particular asset inside of it. Let's see if I can find it for you. A particular asset. Notice this is hard to see here just because it's blurry, but you can see here. Now let me try and find a better image. Maybe there's not one. Well, you can see here that there's a Hawaiian dollar, a Hawaiian card, and then there could be other things such as like a Hawaiian coin. And they do different things. Those that are on the call understand what rewards are versus a dollar versus a coin versus like an NFT type structure. So they're all different asset classes and they have different capabilities. So for instance, a dollar is usually tied to some type of currency and it's a fiat type system. So it usually moves up and down with that system, so to speak. So as the US dollar increases or decreases in foreign exchange value or buying power, it basically ties it all together. So the direct answer to your question is the particular asset that's a default asset is built into each wallet. So the Hawaiian dollar is built in as a baseline for the Hawaiian wallet that ties to the Hawaiian Life app. And then,
okay,
does that make sense?
So similar, yeah, absolutely. So similar to like Fiji, like it'll be the same principles.
You got it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So the Fiji Life app ties to the Fiji wallet. The Fiji wallet ties to the Fijian dollar.
Yeah.
That's exactly, you just totally hit it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then what's gorgeous is there'll be a relationship between the Hawaiian dollar and the Fijian dollar where they can actually exchange. So they can exchange in real time. And you don't even need third-party exchanges to do it because they're all built in the same type of technology and systems. So really brilliant, phenomenal question that you have. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because, and I think we need to remember as well, is like the current infrastructure that we have in our governments today is similar infrastructure, but it's centralized. So going down this route, it's really good to see this ecosystem come alive. It's really good. It's really good to be here and see this. Even though for some people it might be a little bit scary, a little bit different, but I love that we can get together and understand it and ask questions together.
Yeah.
Michael, I had another question. Can a organization like Hawaii have, you know, when you talk about the token being pegged to, say, the dollar. I guess we would just call that a stable coin. So they would have a stable coin if they connected it to, whether it's the Fiji currency or the Mexican peso or whatever. So they can tie one token, I guess, for lack of a better word, I'll call it a coin. They'll tie the coin to the value of a fiat currency. Then they could have a token that fluctuates in value, that possibly is a deflationary token that actually increases in value as people use it. And then they could have a rewards coin where you could reward them for maybe buying a marriage license, or you could reward them for walking 3,000 steps, or, building their using more of the services on Hawaiian Life. So I have the option to go get a driver's license at the DMV, and it costs me $49. Or if I go get my driver's license on Hawaiian Life, it costs me $49, but I get $25 in rewards back that I can convert into the speculative token.
Yep.
Is it possible to have 3 classes of tokens, like a stable coin that's a coin, a token that is tradable, and then a rewards system that redeems for the token?
Phenomenal question. And what I would try, and I'm actually going to dissect this with you because this is really, really important. Notice that there can be different types of assets, coins, dollars, infrastructure, what the world would call NFTs, which has a whole interesting history to it, rewards and tokens. They're actually different types of use cases for different assets. So a token might be something that is private. Maybe it's for a private company or a private asset. It may be on a public exchange. It may be on a private exchange. It may be something that you're looking to fund an organization or business with. A reward may be something that is usually a type of private value exchange or credit system, but it may not be taxed. It may not be, and tax ties to all of these things too, in their own. But let's say that like American Express points or Marriott Rewards points, or these are different rewards-based systems where they are of value exchange, and they can come in and out of other currencies, but it's a class of its own. NFTs, let's just throw that aside for a second. Infrastructure may be something around resources or assets. A dollar may tie to, and you gotta understand, dollars are just the way that we communicate US dollars and systems. Renminbi, mark, pounds, yen, these are all different types of currencies that are looked at as their own type of dollar definition. So definitions and words really matter, but it's a public currency that's usually tied to a country, and some countries peg it to other countries. So for instance, Tuvalu pegs their currency or their dollar to the Australian dollar value. Now, this still has to be determined by the Hawaiian people. So just because we just showed you a wallet, and inside of that wallet, an asset, this transaction that you actually saw right here, so this, right here, this is the first time that it had been installed and actually purchased or used. This one transaction is the first transaction. Now, the question is, what's the value? What's it pegged to? And that is really why we're talking about this Hawaiian ecosystem starting up and actually managing and governing themselves. Now, to your point around, let's see if I can find to your point around the different type of asset class, a coin could be something that is like a public security. So it sits on a public exchange. It's the fair market value that's moving around in price. It's not pegged to a particular dollar. So you're literally going to imagine going public with a coin versus being private with a token. They're both equity, but one is a public equity and one is a private equity. And then a dollar is basically like what you're talking about with a stable asset or a stable coin, a stable dollar. It literally is going to stick to the fair market value of whatever currency it is standardized or built on. So for instance, let's say that we wanted to peg a dollar, particular dollar here, we want to link it to a currency, we would link it here. So let's say that we wanted to tie it to the renminbi or whatever else you wanted to tie it to. You could literally link this particular asset. And as these prices change here, the value and price of this system also changes it automatically built in. So great question. And the country of Hawaii.
Let me see if I got this right. I want to just recap.
Let me just make this point before you jump in.
Go ahead.
The country of Hawaii has to set this up and manage this on their own. So how they're going to actually say, a coin, its value is determined based upon what we put behind it, and that can fluctuate independently of any currency. Or their currency can say, we're actually, everything we do in the Hawaiian Islands is now standardized on what the American systems was. So we'll go ahead and keep that the same. That's up to them to determine it. All I'm saying is the technology is actually there for them to determine it now. That's what's happened this last week. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead with the second part of the question.
Can you pull up the menu again real quick on your screen share?
Yeah. I think it was over here.
Yeah. So if I get this right, the token at the bottom would be like with my company, I'm raising money at a $3 million valuation or a $10 million valuation. I've kind of privately set the price. Yep. So I would use a token if I set up a DAO, maybe to raise money for my company at X price.
Yep. Okay. You got it. That's exactly right.
The next one is, let's see if I got these right. Pull that menu down one more time. The reward, I can set that at any price I want to. I can say $1 equals 1 point, or 1 point equals 50 cents, or whatever, 25 cents. So a rewards a point system. So if I want to give people 5 cents on every dollar of travel they bought, I could just set up a reward token for that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
Okay. And then the coin and the other ones, you said one NFTs. I already know about that one. I don't need to infrastructure. I get that. Dollar would be pegged to a public currency, a fiat currency.
Yep, you got it.
Coin would be traded, and then an asset would be fair market value or appraised value or whatever the seller decides to sell at.
You got it. Yep, you're nailing it all. Exactly.
Okay. All right. And you can have all those asset classes under one DAO.
Yeah, you can. Exactly.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Good question. This is actually kind of a little bit more of an answer to it. So for instance, what you and I are used to in capitalizing and growing a business, you may have a token or a reward. A reward could tie to a flat dollar, and then you could have a coin that ties to a fair market value public, and then a token that token could even convert into the coin. So, as you and I understand capitalization from Western society, you understand that you have private shareholders that get in before the system, before anything's built. And then you have public shareholders. When you go through an IPO, initial public offering, you actually convert those shares into public based, any Tom, Dick, or Harry can come in. And so, but then they may say, we're still going to keep some of them. So a private board may determine what's in green. A public market, based upon purchases, may determine what's in black. And then you've got a flat line, kind of a stable type asset, whether that's a dollar or a reward, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so somebody could have a public or a private, they could convert it to a stable, and then they, a stable coin, and they could use that to purchase on, say, a marketplace, an e-commerce marketplace, because maybe the vendors don't want a coin that's fluctuating in value up and down. That's what's really turned people off on crypto is one day, it's worth 50%, next day it's worth 25%. But if they could convert it to a stable coin and go purchase some vitamins, the vendor knows they're getting X dollars worth of money for their vitamins.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're spot on. And the goal is to have more stability as as you get systems that are tied to really fair market value for assets, and it's not just this gambling or speculation game, there's real systems that are actually using cryptography-based technology, you're going to see over time. So this is actually like a 7-year period where you would see a normal growth in a normal private company and then a selling process with public ecosystems. This is actually an average of what you would normally see in the majority of deals that are done.
By the way, I wouldn't throw off NFTs. I think NFTs have a really good use case in real world assets like homes, because you might have 10 homes in the same neighborhood that all have a deed number and all of them have a different value. And I think that's probably a really great case for NFTs. So many people are used to these stupid, digital images.
No, so let's go ahead.
What's that?
Let's go ahead and dig into that NFTs. Go ahead and make your last point there.
Yeah, I was just saying that, people have not taken NFTs seriously because they've seen, these Bored Apes and all these celebrities promoting these unique images. And whereas I think an NFT for, say, a Picasso painting is a great use case because there's a limited number of them and they all have a different value because they sell for different prices at auctions. But I think for, NFTs, we're starting to see the acronym RWAs, real world assets. And like a 65 Mustang, every VIN number has a different value. And I think RWAs is a great use case for real world assets. So I would add RWAs, real world assets to that category.
Well, there's two things that we're talking about. One, NFTs, I agree with you that they have their own class of their own. But if you understand where the coin NFT term NFT came from, it was basically the SEC, the Security and Exchange Council, basically said, we would allow NFTs and won't go after them. And the reason that they do that is they understand that someone's perspective of a piece of art or collectible type things, whether it's an old car or an old coin, those things can actually have intrinsic value that is undetermined in a fair market value way. However, set that aside, assets that have a fair market value to them, like land that has an appraisal, a car that has an appraisal or a purchase price, all of those things are actually real world assets that are separate from what the world would coin an NFT and what you're talking about with this, RWA. And RWA and NFT are just some marketing terms for folks to get behind as this industry continues to mature. Same thing with DAW and all these different things. But there's really a separation between a collectible art and what they're doing with NFTs versus an asset with the RWA that you're mentioning. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I need a clear understanding on NFTs. I thought, let's say you created two chains. You created, a cryptocurrency chain where every serial number, let's say there's 20 million of them, every serial number had the same value. So that would be a crypto coin. Whereas my understanding, if you created 20 million NFT addresses, 21 million serial numbers on an NFT contract, each NFT could have a different value. So my point was that a housing complex that has 20 million houses in it, every house could have a different value. So an NFT contract would be a better idea. Do I have it wrong? Because
if you really think about it, every house, even if it's a condominium or the same house inside of a development, they actually wouldn't sell for the same exact price.
Correct.
One's going to have a location on a corner, one's going to have a different color to it that people want more, one's going to be available, so it's what you do is you get an appraisal that ties to that actual property, and then that's defined as an asset, not an NFT. And what we have to get through is we have to get the reserve banks to approve banks to issue mortgages that are digital, title companies to issue title insurance policies that are digital, and then people that actually can pay it in a digital payment system. If we nail all four of those, we've got a new digital economy that is cryptographically proven with people's identity that's actually private.
Yeah.
Which is the parallel system to the current nightmare that society's heading towards, where everything is getting centrally, digitally defined, and the biologicals, the physical, and the digital worlds are all coming together. And it's, once people really understand the the combination of those three and how tight of a hold they will have. For instance, I went into the national park today that shouldn't be a national park, which is a different conversation. And you see, one, they say credit cards are the only things that are accepted here, so no cash. This is a national park that won't even accept its own currency. I mean, just think about this for just a second. Why do you think that they would be saying only credit cards? And why do you think that everyone in the world, especially back to 9/11, would say know your customer is a mandated thing for banks? All of these centralized systems, that's how they tie these nooses together. I've been inside of these World Economic Forum meetings. Like this particular one is not the World Economic Forum. This is an IMF meeting. This gentleman here, actually, she's a jewel and he's a wonderful man, but everyone else on the front row, this is IMF. Actually, no, she's not. IMF, all these are IMF here. And do I think they're terrible people? No, not at all. Do I think they understand what they're doing? I really don't think they do. I don't think they understand how they're influencing through recommendations all of these other countries to make monetary policy and changes as the digital ecosystem. Just look at this title: Regional Seminar on the Rise of Digital Money, Implications for Pacific Island Countries. And I promise you, what they did was they filled them full of basic, you're going to follow this process, and everything that you're going to do is going to have know your customer processes built into it. So you must know who they are. And that's fine. But when you start digging into the realities of, do you really know your customer? Can this identity right here, can a bank take an identity here and really know their customer? Especially when they're genealogical based. So for instance, how does someone that actually has all of their identity burnt up and their families and their communities, how do we actually go through a world that actually solves that? And that's why what's happened in Lahaina is such a massive, compelling event, because it creates a clean slate that through the ashes, a whole new system can be stood up. And what's even bigger is the people actually understand this.
Same thing's going to happen in Ukraine with all the blown up centers and people losing all their birth certificates. Ukraine's going to have the same ordeal as well.
I would say all of us are. And in the end, we're all humans on this wonderful earth. And we need to stop trying to control one another and control situations. I mean, we all know that a lot of these wars that are there are because of these secret combinations that want to fight over certain regions and control and systems and put the other parts of society into this chaos. We think differently when there's a war going on. We think differently when there's a pandemic going on, supposed. It's a psyche thing. I mean, I'm still seeing people driving around in cars when they're alone with a mask on.
Yeah.
This isn't like, 2 months ago. It's like yesterday. I saw a dude walking around one today. Anyways, most people on this call understand perceptions around vaccinations and masks and other things that we won't get into, but really good observation and phenomenal questions.
Back to that asset, the tokens, just one last question. Mm-hmm. The asset token, are you talking about an ABT, an asset-backed token, where I can fractionalize my house? So you're assigning the token class that's an asset-backed token where I could sell my house to 10 people?
Yeah. You could do that. That's exactly what the use case for this stuff is.
Fractionalized units. Okay, so that's like could be an ABT. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly the type of use case that we're talking about. Let's see if I can. Oh, I pulled up. Let's see if this one here will have it. This might not have any of it. Yeah. So your thought process is right.
And then your reputation score could determine whether that's why I was thinking the reward structure. If an insurance company knows you're exercising 3,000 steps a day, if they know you're buying healthy stuff on the marketplace, they might give you a better reputation score, which means your insurance rates could be less because you're actually validating the fact that you're leading a healthier lifestyle. So I think the reputation score really ties well into the rewards program. And most of the insurance companies in the United States will give you discounts if they know you're using their app. The insurance companies, if you plug a device into your car and they know you're not driving 95 miles an hour, they'll give you discounted insurance rates. But of course, they're using that device for even more than that, I'm sure. Yeah. But yeah, I think that creating a reward structure for the Hawaiian Nation because they certainly have an issue, a lot of health issues down there, I'm sure. But if the government of Hawaii could say, hey, we want to create an incentive structure where our society gets healthier, they could do that with your system.
Absolutely. And that is actually going to be a big part of what the future is. And we'd welcome the opportunity for you to help build on top of that. I'd also go a step further. And here's an interesting article. Car makers are failing the privacy test. People really don't understand how much data, you talk about insurance, they don't understand how much data these cars have. You got multiple cameras on the inside, you got multiple cameras on the outside, you got gyrators and tons of different systems that are basically all around this car. And where does that data go? And who owns that data? Who controls the data? But imagine if a car maker, and for those that have been on this call for a long time, you've seen we've bought cars, whether it's motorcycles or cars or different manufacturers, and we've tested ways to integrate or work with them. But imagine if a car manufacturer was to allow a digital registration process to happen, and then the data based upon the collection were to be private. I can tell you there's a lot of people, and me included, but I've bought almost every Tesla that there is, and except for whatever that Sportster thing. And I can tell you that they're wonderful, but it's the data that comes with it and the potential liability that's around that. And for convenience, we'll just say, well, we'll just go ahead and not worry about this. But there'll come a day where people will actually buy cars, just like they'll be a part of nations, based upon how they want to be profiled and how they want to be treated. And I would argue that people that build a digital reputation could actually have the ability to get better insurance rates, not just because of them sharing data like this, but because of them actually validating who they are, not just from an education or employment or how they drive their vehicles or how their transactions are, but a combination of all of that overall, and doing it in such a way where the system is actually totally private. Now that's the key. We're really talking about centralized systems versus decentralized systems. That's what this whole conversation really just revolves around, how this model can enable centralized systems, which is really where all the digital world is going. The digital ecosystems are going. But in the digital world that we're standing up, that's a parallel system. The goal is to give everybody their own privacy and freedom. So imagine, to your point, where they could actually get insurance at a lower rate, but they're doing it in a private way. So for and people don't understand this. One of the most competitive insurance companies at least in North America or United States, is Geico. And who owns Geico? Where did Geico come from? I would ask you just to go and do your own research, but it's a similar type understanding. And then, a lot of the health records and religious records and insurance records and land records, all of it tie together in such a way that's coming together that's actually people should be very concerned. And it's
yeah, Michael, I just want to echo that when you was talking about the driving data, and in terms of connectivity, when we speak about 4G, 5G, and 6G, the future is going to be run by algorithms and artificial learnings in a whole ecosystem. So this is why I really enjoy coming here every week and looking at the advancements inside of the digital world, where we talk about privacy. Decentralization is a key part of where the future is going.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks to all the teams. It's really important. And I mean, a lot of people inside of these organizations, they don't see it, they don't see the vision. They don't fully understand. Most people are quite complacent and just drifting through life. So it's really good to see people upholding personal values in this world.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for all of you that have been on this journey and, you know, you've said, hey, I want to get a decentralized phone, even though it might not be what I'm comfortable with. And the next thing you know, because of you using it, you're helping to perfect it. Even finding the problems so that we can come up with solutions, so that we can continue to build in parallel a system that is really a counterbalance to this centralized ecosystem. So when we talk about this centralized versus decentralized, it's all of us together that are going to make this a reality. It's not just the people that are working on software and hardware and services and partnerships and integrations and brand new nations that are standing up in a brand new digital world. It's about the people that will actually say, I want to be a part of this. I want to engage this. I want to, like the other gentleman that's been talking on here, Tom, he's talking about building a whole ecosystem that basically rewards people for just living. And not only that, but directing, you know, value that they could normally, they're just leaving on the table and you're giving to the centralized systems. There really could be a massive future together, but the key is united is how we'll actually do it. So we'll take time for one more question if people have it.
Michael, James here. I don't have a question as such, but I noticed a couple of grammatical errors on the Hawaiian Life website because I had looked through it. Where shall I direct those? It's just like differences between there and stuff like that, but I think it all just creates a good impression.
You feel free just to send those in. The best place to get them is into L or into Wally or into myself or any of those individuals, and then we'll get it to the right folks and get it fixed up. So thank you. That's a perfect example of people that they want to help, you know, and on the other side, you have to have a responsive team that says, hey, okay, we found the issues and they're fixed by the morning. So
Michael, I love it that you're not the only person that misspells words. I do too.
Yeah, well, it's not me. It's usually people that this is like their third language. You know, English is their third language, and I don't know about you, but I speak one language, and I'm grateful to work with people that speak many languages. And if they're figuring that out, hey, if grammar is the only problem we got, we're successful. So, yeah.
Yeah, Michael, and that's the thing. I'm not here trying to be some kind of pernickety so-and-so, but I just know that it puts some people off when they read it and like, oh, somebody hasn't paid attention to detail, where we know that there's lots of detail gone into things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
And also, you said you were coming to Florida. When are you planning on being down here?
I'll let you know on that particular one. I can tell you that there's something beautiful that's about to unfold. And there's some pretty big recording studios that have been reserved and some pretty big people that are going to be involved. But I was supposed to go down after a 25th event, which, by the way, for the second time, so first time I was kicked out as just an attendee. Second time I was removed as the keynote. And it's inside of an event that's a digital summit for Hawaii. Now, Hawaiians and Hawaii are very different, in my opinion. Well, there's a different conversation there, but it'll be interesting to see how this event plays out one way or the other. But it was right after that event that we were all heading down to Florida, and we also had some other things that were supposed to transpire prior, but it didn't. So, but I look forward to going through that with you.
Yeah, just keep me posted because I just want to make sure I'm available. So
for sure. And you know how to get me too, so we can schedule that way. So,
right.
Well, I know there's a lot of other questions. If someone has something they want to bring up, you're more than welcome to. I know there's a couple other hands that are still up. So if you want to go through it, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to play this video from Phil. I actually I talked to Phil this last week. There's a lot of advancements that are going on. And Phil really represents what he calls a fourth way, which is unity, but not through fighting, but through love. And as I'm out here in Hawaii, I'm learning a lot more about what aloha means. It's not just love, it's so much deeper. And I just had a wonderful conversation with Phil this last week, and some of the people that he's he has served and loved for a very long time. For instance, a lot of the tribes in Canada, he helped to set free from a point of just standing up. And it wasn't just him, but this cap that he has here, these feathers, there were massive ceremonies where they would actually give these feathers to build out these caps, and they mean something. And then when he passes this at the end of the video to the next generation, it means something. And there's just a lot to it. There's a lot to the words when he talks about many hearts and many minds, but in one body, or many bodies and hearts that are many, let's see, so many bodies and many hearts. No, we're going to have to listen to it together. You can download it here if you'd like to, but I forgot. I usually know it really well. Anyways, appreciate your time. We'll talk to you next week. We're coming up on being out of time. So here we go. We're going to watch Phil here.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Mitakepi, my very, very beloved relatives of our human family, we live in a corrupt global system.
But are we a part of it?